He punched him in the stomach.
Yeah, but where did he punch him?
Yeah, in the gut.
In the gut.
In the same place where the seal is.
In the same place where the seal was. All of the pain that Naruto's felt.
As a result of that thing being inside of him.
As a result of the thing being inside him that his dad put there.
Yeah.
He's now in a weird way saying, this is what you did to me. This is the pain that you gave me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the pain that you gave me was a result of what you couldn't do.
Yeah. Where you fell short, where you weren't enough, where you were not able to stop the pain and the destruction. That's now created pain for me.
In a weird way, I've inherited your shortcomings. The worst parts about you, and like Minato's like set
amazing in so many different ways.
Like theoretically, like perfect.
Yep.
But in this one sense, it's like you weren't able to deal with this.
Yep.
And so now it's become my burden.
Yeah. Well, it's the sins of the father are passed to the children.
I've heard that saying before, but when you say that as a therapist, like what are you talking about?
Well, there's a concept that we have about intergenerational trauma. It gets tossed around a lot these days, and it's an important thing for us to be looking through. But I don't know how much people really understand the mechanics of intergenerational trauma, because the idea is the things that happen to your parents will have an impact and an influence on you, right? And so people will talk about this in lots of different ways with lots of, through wars, genocides, lots of traumatic things that people will go through, there's this fallout effect that further generations see. But the question is, why do they experience that? Because they're not there for the initial experience.
Yes.
Right? So you and I come from immigrant war refugee families.
Yes.
We were not there during World War II.
Yeah.
We never experienced having to pack everything up and run for our lives. So why do we still experience some of the impacts in our family that are a result of that?
And to be clear to maybe people who are listening, we're not talking about PTSD. We're talking about our grandfather was a hoarder, and now I, for the life of me, will not throw away any little knickknack or trinket ever, period. Everything is valuable. Everything is needed. Yeah.
Well, and there's other pieces that go along with that too, but I think the crux of where it ends up having an impact on people further down the line is that the things that you experience will end up having a shaping effect on your, I don't know if I want to say personality or your actions going forward. Because I almost want to make a distinction between personality and post-traumatic reactions.
Yes.
A lot of the time people will confuse those things for being the same thing, but the reactions that you have because of traumatic experiences that you go through, you think about those actions are also going to have consequences too. You develop traits, right? Something like, for example, I lost everything, so now I'm going to hold everything together. I'm not going to let anything go. Who's going to be most exposed to those actions? Your family, specifically your kids.
Yes.
And now your kids have to grow up almost with, because of your actions, as a result of what happened to you, almost like the echoes of that original trauma. It's like your actions in many ways carry forward the effects of that trauma, and then it has an impact on the next generation, and then that generation has that echo further down the line. And so there is really this idea when it comes to you failed and now I have to suffer. I love the symbolism here because it really is accurate for real life. Wherever your parents, less so in like a saving the world type of way, but more of where your parents have failed to develop, where they have failed to actualize themselves, where they have failed to properly address trauma and difficulties in their own life. Because of the way that they will then interact with you, you're going to reap some of the negative results of that.
Now, you're talking about that specifically from the nurture side of things.
Yeah, it is a little bit different than, or at least it seems like at least that way that we're nurtured, the actions that you take when you're in relationship with me, in my opinion anyways, they seem like the main mechanic of intergenerational trauma. Yeah. There's potentially some pieces around genetics and epigenetics and how your genes change as a result of trauma, for sure.
Maybe I can speak to that because that's like before I dropped out of applying to med school, this was the last thing that I studied. There's a particular study that everybody references when they talk about this. Basically what happened is they took a generation of mice and they created a system where they would expose them to a particular smell and they would be shocked at the same time. And so they would induce this fear response to the degree where they eventually got them to be afraid of the smell, so that when they smelt it, they would respond the same way as if they were being shocked.
Yeah.
And then what they did is they bred these mice, and then they looked at the children, and they didn't shock the second generation of mice, but they exposed them to the cherry blossom smell, and they were still experiencing that same fear response. And it lasted for 2 to 3 generations.
Yeah.
It's really tough to prove this in humans because you can't exactly do that to people. But there are experiences in the world that mimic this. Like, for example, the genetic descendants of Holocaust survivors had a higher likelihood of experiencing PTSD just because they were their children.
Yeah.
That has more or less been established as a fact. We don't necessarily know the mechanism. There is some epigenetic, like epi just means on top of genetics, your genetics, your actual ATGC, base pair sequences, those don't change.
Yeah.
But the information on top of those that's sort of activating or deactivating them, those do change.
The idea of which genes get turned on, which genes get turned off.
Yeah. And so I wonder how much the changing genetic component not only passes on experiences like that or creates longer echoes of that experience into second, third generations, but also how much does that reinforce that nurture element that you were talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
How much more potent is the way that you interact with your child when that child has almost experienced a little bit of that same thing as well in a genetic sense?
You think it's like the combination of nature and nurture working together.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, theoretically, if we pull out the trauma element of this, it's a fascinating way that human beings, and probably other animals too, but like the way that we as genetic organisms with genetic material, the way that these systems work together to help us adapt.
Yes.
Right? It's like it's priming us. You can almost think like that epigenetic process is almost priming us to be ready so that as soon as the same thing happens, it's like we're already 3 steps ahead. We're ready to go. Yeah. It's so potentially helpfully adaptive depending on the circumstance that we're in, but it can also be something that perpetuates this trauma response.
Well, I mean, that's almost maybe the nefarious thing about it is that it's the correct response, but you're no longer in the situation where that's helpful. If you were still a prisoner in World War II Germany, that response might be helpful, but you're not anymore.
If you're still on the savannah in Africa and your parents have an interaction with a lion and you're still there, you grow up there and it primes you for how to interact with lions, wonderfully adaptive. But the fact that things can change like this in our modern world, and you can move from Eastern Europe to Canada, and within the span of 2 or 3 generations, like within the span of 5 years, the war is over, right? But the echoes of that are still going to have an impact on people trying to live their normal day-to-day lives in a brand new country.